They made Briala Fen wear the Traitor Crown because a dead man's pardon had appeared in the royal archive, and the court needed a living
power
servant to explain
awakens.
why Mercy had survived.
We are with
No
you.
one asked why
I
Mercy
feel
needed a
it.
Traitor Crown if treason was truly all the record held. A clean treason record did not need a crown trained to bite memory.
The crown is
waited
breaking!
On a black velvet
I will
cushion beneath
shield
the
us.
execution balcony. It was smaller than a battle crown, narrower than a queen's circlet, and crueler than both. Its iron points curved inward like claws trained to hold a skull. Blue-black flames slept inside the metal grooves. Every name branded as treason was supposed to burn when the crown touched skin. Every liar was supposed to confess before the third pulse of fire. Every condemned mouth was supposed to open and give the court a cleaner ending than blood. Briala stood before it with her hands bound in silver ash cord. No one asked why an oath-bound archive servant would risk her life to preserve a pardon no one had taught her to read. No one asked why the pardon had been hidden under 7 layers of execution ink. Execution ink did not erase Mercy. It trained the archive to call Mercy by another name, and names once taught to paper could outlive the mouth that spoke them. No one asked why High Crown Warden Corveth Fell had been the first to call it forged before anyone else saw the handwriting. Questions did not rise high in the crown of ash unless noble mouths carried them. Servant questions died in the throat. Corveth lifted the black crown from its cushion. He was thin, silver-haired, and dressed in court-black robes, sewn with small iron crowns along the sleeves. His face did not show anger. Anger would have made him look personal. Corveth preferred office. Office made cruelty sound like maintenance. And maintenance was how old lies survived without looking violent. Briala Fen, he said, oath-bound servant of the Lower Crown Archive, you are accused of preserving a treasonous mercy record. Briala looked at the crown, not at him. The record was already there. A servant found alone with forbidden pardon script is never innocent. I was assigned to scrape old wax from the execution ledgers. By whose order? Briala's eyes moved to the black roll tucked beneath Corveth's arm. He did not look down. The order she had carried that morning had disappeared before the guards dragged her from the archive. The wax on it had carried the Crown Warden's seal. The clerk who delivered it now stood behind Corveth with lowered eyes and both hands folded into his sleeves. A familiar pattern. In the royal archives, noble orders could vanish. Servant obedience remained. That was how guilt learned to travel downward. Downward was where every clean record sent its dirt. And archives were full of clean records. The Ashen Court watched from tiers of dark stone, each noble framed by candlelight and old dragon banners. Above them the execution balcony hung beneath a ceiling painted with the first kings of ash and flame. Their eyes were all made of blue glass. From below it looked as if the dead kings were always watching judgment and never stopping it. Dragon King Aricor Valeth sat upon the high throne. He had not spoken yet. That silence was its own weapon. He was broad-shouldered, black-haired, and still in the way of a blade laid across a table. His armor was dark dragon bone, edged with blue fire at the collar and wrists. A scar cut across one cheek, old and pale against his severe face. His eyes were the color of flame seen through deep water. The court called him merciless. The history books agreed. History agreed most easily where correction ink had already dried. Briala had copied enough of those books to know how often agreement looked like ink laid over something scraped away. Corveth turned toward the throne. Majesty, the Traitor Crown will reveal whether she forged pardon script to soften a condemned name. Aricor's gaze moved to Briala. She felt it like heat. Not kind heat. Attention. That was not safety. A king could notice a servant and still let the law consume her. What was the name? Aricor asked. Corveth's mouth tightened by one precise thread. A condemned rebel from your first year. Name. The court shifted. Briala answered before Corveth could bury it under title. Meron Voss. The name struck the air strangely. Not loudly. Deeply. Aricor's fingers closed on the throne arm. Corveth saw it. Briala saw him see it. An old traitor, Corveth said. Executed by confirmed crown decree. Briala looked up. Then why was there a pardon beneath the decree? No one breathed for half a heartbeat. A servant had not only answered. She had placed 2 records beside each other and asked which one lied. Corveth stepped closer. The crown will decide. 2 guards forced Briala to her knees. The stone was cold through her thin gray dress. She did not fight them. Fighting would give the court a simpler story. She kept her spine straight instead because sometimes dignity was the only rebellion allowed before death. Corveth lowered the traitor crown. The first point touched her hair. The second touched her brow. The third bit into skin. Pain flashed white behind her eyes. The blue-black flame inside the crown awakened. The court leaned forward. They expected fire to rush down Briala's face and force treason from her mouth. Instead, the crown went silent. Not dead. Listening. Briala felt its metal tighten around her skull, not like a crown claiming her, but like a locked archive suddenly finding a missing key. Cold fire slid behind her eyes. A memory that was not hers pressed against the inside of the world. She whispered, "This crown remembers something." Corveth's hand snapped toward the crown. "Seal the reading." Aricor stood. The hall changed around that single movement. "Do not touch her." Corveth froze with his fingers inches from the crown. Blue fire rose from the traitor crown. It did not burn Briala. It opened above her. A vision formed in the air. A younger Aricor, standing in this same hall armor, unscarred hand, raised before a kneeling prisoner man with blood on his sleeve, and no weapon in his hand. His voice, younger and rawer, filled the court in blue flame. "Mercy is not treason when surrender has already been given." The vision shook. Black crown script slammed over it, trying to bury the words. Corveth stepped back too late. The traitor crown rang once. Mercy record retained. Archive contact selected. Treason claim disputed. The crown had chosen contact, not worth. Briala was not blessed. She was available. The crown had named the mercy. It had not yet named the ink that buried it. And buried ink had a seal. Briala's breath caught. The crown had not named her traitor. It had not chosen her. It had opened a record the court had built itself to hide. Aricor stared at the vision with the face of a man watching his own past return from a grave he had not known he owned. Corveth lifted the black roll under his arm. The crown tightened around Briala's head. A line of blue fire wrote itself across the stone beneath her knees. The traitor crown was never made to expose traitors. It was made to trap anyone who remembered the Dragon King was merciful. A trap that old did not wait for guilt. It waited for contact. But a trap built for memory still needed a hand to set it. And Corveth Fell had reached for the black roll before the crown finished reading. The traitor crown had kept Aricor's mercy as record, not absolution. Absolution would have lifted the crown. Record only made the wound legible. That was the first thing Briala understood as the iron points tightened against her skull. The blue fire vision above her did not forgive the king. It did not lift the crown from her head. It did not turn the court kind or make the pain noble. It only held one buried moment in the air because the archive had tried too hard to make mercy look like treason. The younger Aricor still stood inside the blue flame hand raised before Marin Voss. Mercy is not treason when surrender has already been given. The words remained suspended above the ashen court, bright enough to touch every face, and sharp enough to cut through years of approved history. Corveth Fell lifted the black roll. The traitor crown bit deeper. Briala's breath broke, but she did not bow her head. Bowing would have given the crown more skull to bite. She kept her spine straight and let the blood from one small wound slide down toward her temple. The crown did not protect her. It used the contact. And contact in the archive was another word for a servant made useful by pain. That was worse than cruelty. Cruelty at least looked at the body it harmed. Procedure looked only at the record it needed. Corveth's voice remained calm. Archive contact contamination. The servant has awakened a false mercy residue. Briala's lips were dry. If it is false, why are you trying to seal it? The black roll smoked at the edge. Not much. Enough. Aricor's eyes moved from the smoke to Corveth's hand. Corveth saw that, and turned the roll slightly inward, as if an office could hide fire by changing the angle of paper. Majesty, he said, execution records become unstable when handled by lower archive servants. The crown is responding to her contamination, not to historical truth. Briala looked up through the pane. Read what covered the pardon. Corveth's mouth tightened. Execution ink cannot be tried through archive servant contact. Corveth said it like law, but his black roll smoked like fear. The phrase settled over the hall like a familiar blanket. A doctrine. A way to stop thought before thought reached office. Briala lifted her bound hands as far as the silver ash cord allowed. Then it should not have needed my contact to reopen. The Traitor Crown rang once. The blue vision shuddered. Black script crawled over the memory again, trying to smother Aricor's raised hand, the kneeling prisoner, the word mercy. This time the crown did not let the ink finish covering the scene. It read, pardon script entered. Execution ink layered. Crown warden seal applied. Mercy renamed treason. The crown had named the ink. It had not yet named who gave that ink authority. The words burned across the stone beneath Briala's knees. The court did not erupt. It tightened. Men shifted their weight by a fraction. Women turned their rings inward. The clerks near the archive bench looked down at the ledgers in their arms, as if paper could suddenly accuse them by touch. Aricor stared at the first line. Pardon script entered. Then the last. Mercy renamed treason. His face did not soften. Good. Softness would have been too easy. His mercy had existed, but she was still kneeling with a cursed crown cutting into her head because he had allowed the court to treat doubt as treason. He stepped down from the throne dais. The crown flared. Corveth spoke sharply. Majesty approach risks destabilizing the contact record. Aricor stopped. Not close enough to save her. Close enough to understand that saving her the wrong way would bury the line again. The Traitor Crown wrote another warning beneath the record. Forced removal collapses crown reading. Treason claim restored. Archive contact condemned. Briala saw Aricor read it. She saw the anger cross his face and fail to become action. Part of her hated him for stopping. Part of her needed him to. The crown had made rescue into erasure. Corveth had built a law where mercy could become another way to silence her. Aricor looked at Briala. Did you forge the pardon? No. Did you know what it was? I knew it had been hidden badly by someone who believed servants would never be allowed to compare layers. Corveth stepped between them. She admits unauthorized interpretation. Briala laughed once small and bitter. No. I admit eyesight. The crown pulsed. Eyesight entered. Corveth's jaw worked. Aricor turned toward him. The pardon was written first. The crown has shown an incomplete sequence. The execution ink came after, to correct a mercy error. The hall stilled around that phrase. Mercy error. Briala felt the crown seize it. The iron points pressed deeper, and blue fire flooded her vision until she tasted metal. The crown read, Mercy error entered. The words did not belong to Briala. They belonged to the office that had survived by correcting mercy into ash. Corveth went very still, not afraid. Measuring loss. Aricor's voice lowered. My mercy became your error. Corveth bowed his head. Your first year was politically fragile. A surrendered rebel could have become a symbol. A living man became ash instead. A necessary ash. Briala's stomach turned. Marin Voss had been a necessary ash because mercy made the king look less useful to those who preferred fear. Aricor looked at the Traitor Crown, then at Briala's bleeding temple. His expression changed not into absolution but into the uglier thing beneath it, responsibility arriving late. I let the crown touch her because the archive made doubt look like treason. His admission did not loosen the iron. It only made the crown hold him in the record beside her pain. The crown accepted the line. Royal doubt entered. Crown contact permitted. Servant pain continuing. The last line burned brightest. Briala looked at him. You did not need my hands to find mercy. They needed my hands to carry the forgery. And forgery became safer when it wore a servant's fingerprints. Aricor did not defend himself. Corveth lifted the black roll and pressed its smoking edge toward the crown. The blue fire vision buckled. The younger Aricor's voice distorted. Marin Voss's kneeling form blurred under fresh execution ink. Briala cried out as the crown tightened again. The record remained open because the crown had her contact. Not her power. Her pain. The Traitor Crown read one final line before the black roll could seal the vision. The pardon had not survived because Briala forged it. It had survived because Aricor's mercy was written first, And Corveth Fell's Execution Inc. had spent years teaching the archive to call that mercy treason. But Execution Inc. could not teach an archive unless a higher seal had allowed the lesson. The Traitor Crown had named the ink but not the authority behind it. Authority was where old lies stopped looking like forgery and started looking like law. Briala felt the difference in the way the iron points pressed into her scalp. The crown had opened the first layer, and now the record wanted the next. It did not care that blood had begun to slide past her temple. It did not care that her knees ached against the stone or that the silver ash cord had bitten dark grooves into her wrists. It had found archive contact, and contact was the only road it knew. That road ran through her pain because the court had paved it there. The blue fire vision still hung above her. Young Aricor. Marin Voss. The raised hand. The mercy command. Then black execution ink layered over it again, not thick enough to bury the image, but enough to remind everyone that the archive had spent years teaching the court which version to see first. Corveth Fell held the black correction roll against his chest. Its edges smoked. Aricor looked at the roll, then at the crown cutting into Briala's head. His face carried the ugly stillness of a man understanding that his mercy had returned through another person's pain. That understanding did not free her. Briala lifted her head as far as the crown allowed. Read who authorized the execution ink. Corveth's mouth thinned. Correction authority cannot be tried through archive contact. He did not say servant this time. That was how Briala knew the word had become dangerous. Archive contact sounded more lawful, cleaner, farther from her bleeding skin. The Traitor Crown pulsed. Archive contact entered. The crown used the clean word. Her blood supplied the meaning. Briala tasted iron. Then why does the correction roll burn? When I ask. A blue flame thread leapt from the crown toward the black roll. Corveth moved it back too quickly. The court saw that. Not enough to speak. Enough to remember. Aricor stepped down one more stair from the throne dais. Let the crown read. Corveth bowed, but his fingers tightened over the roll. Majesty, if correction authority is disturbed during an active treason claim, the claim may become unstable. Briala laughed once under her breath. Unstable always arrives after the office is named. The crown rang. Unstable entered. Corveth's eyes sharpened. The blue fire vision widened. The pardon script appeared beneath the execution ink, now pale and clear, Aricor's younger seal burning at the bottom. Above it, layer after layer of black ink settled like ashfall. At the corner of the document, a second seal pressed into view, not Corveth's seal alone, not the Crown Warden's office mark alone, but the old dragon skull of a dead king. The Traitor Crown read. Correction roll entered. Crown Warden hand applied. Dead king seal carried. Mercy error authorized. The crown had named the authority. It had not yet named what that authority preserved. The final line burned brighter than the rest. Mercy error authorized. Briala understood it before Aricor spoke. The archive had not merely hidden his mercy. It had been given permission to treat mercy as a mistake. Aricor stared at the dead king's seal. That seal belonged to my father. Corveth bowed his head. King Vaelric's final archive protocols remained lawful after his death. Your first year required continuity. My command required obedience. Your mercy endangered continuity. The crown pulsed. Continuity entered. Continuity was the word old crowns used when they wanted the future to obey the dead. Briala's throat tightened. That is a beautiful word for killing what did not suit the old law. Corveth turned on her. You overstep. I am wearing the crown you put on me. You made my head the table. And now the archive could not pretend the table had no wound. The Traitor Crown rang low. Contact table entered. A few archive clerks lowered their eyes. Aricor's gaze did not leave the seal. If my mercy became an error by seal, then my throne let office stand above command. The crown accepted the line. Throne admission entered. Office above command. Servant pain continuing. The last line cut through Briala harder than the iron. She looked at him then, not with softness, not with gratitude. Your mercy was not enough to save him. Do not make it enough to forgive you. Mercy remembered too late could still become vanity if the wounded were made to kneel for it. The words changed his face. Good. Mercy returned as record could become another crown for him to wear if no one stopped it. He could become the king who had once been merciful, betrayed by old law, wounded by dead authority. The court would love that story because it gave them sorrow without debt. Briala would not give it to him. Aricor lowered his eyes to the blood at her temple. No. One word. Not command. Acceptance. Corveth moved before the moment could deepen. He snapped the black correction roll open and dragged one smoking edge toward the crown reading. The vision buckled. The dead king's seal flared. The pardon script blurred. The word mercy twisted black ink crawling across it until the letters began to bend toward treason again. Pain struck through Briala's skull. She cried out and the crown tightened as if punishing her for being the only living contact left. Aricor moved forward. The crown wrote a warning across the stone before he reached her. Forced seal break collapses authority reading. Treason claim restored. Archive contact condemned. He stopped with his hand half raised. Briala hated the relief that followed. If he tore the crown away, Corveth would have everything back: treason, forgery, condemned servant, corrected archive. Mercy would vanish cleanly under rescue. She forced her eyes open. Do not let him use my pain and then call it mercy. Aricor's hand lowered. Corveth pressed the roll harder. The blue fire vision narrowed to a thin blade of light above Briala's head. The Traitor Crown read through the pressure, one final line burning beneath the dead king's seal. The execution ink had not acted from Corveth's hand alone. The black correction roll carried a dead king's seal, authorizing the archive to treat Aricor's mercy as an error before the pardon ever reached judgment. But an authority that old had not survived on ink alone. The Traitor Crown had named the dead king's seal, but not what the seal had preserved. Briala felt the crown search for that answer through the cuts it had already made. The iron point stayed buried against her scalp, cold at first, then burning as blue fire crawled through the grooves. Blood slid down her temple and gathered near her jaw. The crown did not stop it. The crown did not spare her. It only used the open wound as archive contact, because the court had made pain the easiest doorway for record. Above her, the blue fire vision held 3 layers at once. Aricor's mercy, Corveth's execution ink, the dead king's seal. The ashen court stared at them as if history had become a blade hanging over every noble throat. Corveth fell, recovered first. Men like him always did. Not because they were braver, but because office trained fear to speak in lawful words. Majesty, he said, folding the black correction roll halfway shut, the crown reading, has entered preservation instability. Briala's breath shook. Preservation. The word tasted like ash. Corveth turned slightly toward her. Preservation records cannot be tried through a bleeding archive contact. The crown pulsed. Bleeding archive contact entered. Briala closed her eyes for one heartbeat. The crown used the clean phrase. Her blood supplied the meaning. Aricor stood below the throne steps now, not close enough to touch her, not far enough to pretend he had not seen the wound. His gaze moved from the blood at her temple to the dead king's seal burning in blue fire above her head. He looked dangerous. He did not yet look useful. Briala opened her eyes. Read what the dead king's seal preserved. Corveth's fingers tightened on the black roll. Smoke slipped between them. The servant cannot compel a dead sovereign's preservation protocol. Briala's voice was low. Then why does the protocol answer through my blood? The Traitor Crown rang. The sound bent downward through the stone and upward through the vision. The dead king's seal widened until its dragon skull filled the air above Briala, hollow-eyed and crowned in old black fire. Then the crown read, merciless image preserved. Pardons corrected. Crown warden authority sustained. Living command subordinated. The words did not strike the hall like thunder. They sank. That made them worse. A thunderclap could be endured. A truth that sank entered the floor, the ledgers, the bones of every noble who had knelt to a throne made terrifying by corrected mercy. Aricor stared at the first line. Merciless image preserved. Not kingdom preserved. Not border preserved. Not justice preserved. Image. The court had not merely hidden one pardon. It had kept an entire shape of king alive because fear served the council better than mercy ever had. Corveth spoke before anyone else could breathe. A sovereign image must be maintained during succession instability. Aricor's eyes cut to him. My first year was not instability. It was my reign. It was a reign under inheritance. It was my command. It was a command the archive had authority to correct. The crown pulsed. Correct entered. Briala laughed once, but pain broke it into a sharp breath. Correcting mercy into death. That is what your clean word means. Corveth did not look at her. You continue to overinterpret. I am still wearing your crown. The Traitor Crown answered. Contact continues. Servant pane active. Aricor's face hardened at the last line. Good. Let him read it every time. Let the returned memory of his mercy arrive beside the present fact of her suffering. Let him understand that remembering he had once been better did not make him better now. He looked at the vision again, at the dead king's seal pressing its authority over his younger hand. If my mercy was made heir to preserve my throne, he said, then my crown has been wearing murder as order. The blue fire accepted his words. Royal admission entered. Murder as order entered. Corveth's mouth thinned. Majesty. You endanger the symbolic foundation of your rule. Briala lifted her head despite the crown. Then, stop letting a dead king's seal use my blood to prove you were once better. The hall went still. Not because she had insulted the king, because she had refused him the easiest road out of shame. Aricor did not turn away. His voice came rougher than before. What does the crown require? Corveth moved at once. Majesty, no further reading should be permitted. Preservation instability has contaminated the record. Briala looked at the black roll in his hand. He asked the crown. The crown tightened. Pain burned white behind her eyes. The blue fire vision flickered, but the words remained. Contact required until preservation sequence completes. Forced crown removal restores treason claim. Mercy record collapses. Archive contact condemned. Aricor read the warning. His jaw flexed. She saw the same old battle in him, the desire to tear away the crown to kill Corveth, to make the court watch him choose her safety over procedure. It would be beautiful for a breath. Then the record would die. Corveth would call the vision unstable. Maron Voss would remain a traitor. Briala would become the servant who made the king destroy proof. Do not, she said. Aricor's eyes returned to hers. Briala's voice trembled, but it held. Do not make rescue another correction. The words struck him cleanly. His hand lowered. Corveth snapped the black roll open with both hands. The dead king's seal flared dark. Black script poured from the roll toward the crown, trying to cover the line merciless image preserved before the court could finish understanding it. Briala screamed when the iron points drove deeper. The crown read through her pain. The dead king's seal had not preserved the kingdom. It had preserved the image of a merciless dragon king, correcting every pardon that threatened it, and keeping the living king's command beneath the archive's dead authority. The word image stayed burning above the ashen hall longer than any noble wanted to look at it. Not kingdom. Not justice. Image. Briala remained on her knees beneath it, the traitor crown cutting into her scalp, her bound hands resting against her lap because the guards had not bothered to loosen the silver ash cord. Blood slid along her temple and touched the corner of her mouth. She tasted salt and iron and old smoke. The crown did not care. It did not comfort her. It did not shield her from Corveth's black roll or from the stone bruising her knees. It only kept the record open because the archive had found the one body in the hall disposable enough to use as contact. Aricor stood below the throne steps looking at the blue fire words as if they had cut a door into his own reign. Corveth watched him carefully. That was how Briala knew the next layer mattered. The crown warden did not watch the crown. He watched the king measuring whether memory had become dangerous enough to require another correction. The record has exceeded its original claim, Corveth said. The servant was charged with preserving forged pardon script. Broader preservation history is not admissible. Briala breathed through the crown's pressure. You always know when history becomes too broad. Corveth's gaze lowered to her. A bleeding archive contact cannot decide relevance. The traitor crown pulsed. Bleeding archive contact entered. Aricor's jaw tightened. Briala looked at him before he could speak. Do not only hate the phrase because it names my blood. Hate it because your court finds it useful. The words reached him. Not gently. Good. She was tired of giving truth a soft path toward men who had stood above the instruments that hurt her. Aricor turned back to the crown. What did Marin Voss's execution become? Corveth moved at once. Majesty corrected execution outcomes cannot be reopened through contact distortion. Briala lifted her head. Read what Marin's death became. The crown tightened. Pain flashed behind her eyes and the blue fire vision changed. The younger Aricor and the kneeling Maron blurred. The pardon script folded inward. The execution ink hardened over it, then spread beyond the page into a larger ledger bound in black dragon hide. Briala knew that ledger. She had cleaned the locked shelf beneath it for 3 years and had never been permitted to touch the spine. The first treason precedence. Every crown servant knew its name. No crown servant was told what rested inside. The Traitor Crown read, First pardon corrected. Mercy precedent removed. Surrender law narrowed. Traitor Crown doctrine born. The last line made Corveth's hand tighten around the black roll. Doctrine born. Briala understood then why Maron's pardon could not simply vanish. It had to be corrected. It had to be turned into something useful. A buried mercy did not only erase one man's life. It built a law truly bow that could bite every future mercy before it reached paper. Aricor's face went pale beneath the blue fire. My first pardon became the foundation for the crown that condemns mercy. Corveth answered, Your first corrected treason decree stabilized the realm, no, Briala said. It trained surrender to look like deception. The crown rang once. Surrender deception entered. A ripple passed through the archive clerks. Not panic. Memory. The kind that made men clutch ledgers closer to their chests. Aricor looked toward them. How many surrender petitions were judged under that doctrine? Corveth's voice sharpened. That question is outside the active charge. Briala looked at the king, the iron crown biting into her head. So was mercy. The crown accepted it. Mercy outside charge entered. Aricor closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, anger had not left. It had changed direction. If Marin's death became law, he said, then every mercy I withheld after him may have been fear wearing my name. The crown wrote part of it down. Fear wearing royal name entered. Corveth spoke quickly. Majesty, the crown cannot distinguish your restraint from archival necessity. Briala's voice came thin. That is because your archive taught it not to. The black roll smoked harder. Corveth unrolled it another inch. Fresh correction ink crawled along its surface, trying to reach the blue fire ledger above Briala. The crown tightened before the ink touched it. She cried out, and the sound struck the court harder because it did not sound grand. It sounded human. Aricor moved. The warning flared beneath his boots. Forced interference collapses, precedent reading. Forgery claim restored. Archive contact condemned. He stopped. Briala saw the cost of stopping cut across his face. Still, she said what he needed to hear. Do not mourn the mercy you lost while I am wearing the law it became. The hall went silent around that. Aricor looked at the Traitor Crown, then at the black ledger in the vision, then at Briala. I hear you. Then let it read. Corveth's expression hardened. If that precedent falls, every execution tied to surrender law becomes reviewable. Aricor's eyes turned to him. Good. The word entered the room like a blade laid flat on a table. The crown rang low. Review entered. Corveth snapped the black roll toward the vision. Correction ink surged upward. The blue fire ledger began to close. The line Traitor Crown doctrine born flickered, then dimmed at the edges. Briala felt the crown bite deeper, pulling the record through her skull as if memory itself had weight. She forced herself not to bend. The Traitor Crown read one final line before the black ink swallowed half the vision. Marin Voss had not been executed only to bury one pardon. His death had become the first mercy precedent corrected into treason, the law that taught the Traitor Crown to bite every memory of a merciful king. The blue fire ledger closed halfway, but the crown did not release Briala's head. It tightened, not with anger. Anger belonged to living hands. This was colder than that. This was the pressure of a law discovering that one of its first sentences had been read aloud in the room where it had expected obedience. The points of the Traitor Crown sank deeper into her scalp. Briala's vision blurred at the edges, but the center stayed cruelly clear. Marin Voss's name, Aricor's first mercy. the black ledger of treason precedents, and the line that had made mercy a thing the crown could bite. She breathed through her teeth. The court watched. Not kindly. Not even fully with hatred. They watched the way courts watched instruments at work, waiting to see whether the body inside the law would survive long enough to become useful, or die soon enough to become neat. Aricor stood still beneath the blue fire. He was closer than before, but not close enough to help. The warning at his feet had gone dim, not gone. It waited for him to make mercy easy, and evidence dead. Corveth Fell's correction roll smoked in his hands. The precedent reading has concluded, he said. Further inquiry into crown formation is irrelevant to the servant's charge. Briala lifted her head a fraction. Pain answered like a blade. Crown formation, she said. That is a careful name for teaching iron what to punish. The Traitor Crown pulsed. Crown formation entered. Corveth's lips tightened. Aricor looked at the crown's inner points, then at the blood sliding down Briala's face. What formed it? Corveth bowed toward him, all office and no shame. The Traitor Crown was consecrated by lawful precedent and dead sovereign authority. Its structure is beyond challenge during an active treason claim. Briala almost laughed. Everything that hurts me becomes beyond challenge once I ask about it. The crown rang once. Question entered. The blue fire ledger opened again, not fully, only enough to reveal a black diagram behind the written precedent. A crown drawn from above. Iron points. Inner teeth. Flame grooves. Each part labeled in execution ink. Briala's stomach turned. She had cleaned diagrams like that in the lower archive. She had scraped wax from their edges. She had never been told those were not designs. They were instructions. Read how the crown was taught, she whispered. Corveth stepped forward. Crown construction cannot be tried through condemned archive contact. Briala looked at him through blood and blue flame. Then stop condemning archive contact before it reads construction. The crown accepted the line before Corveth could. Condemnation before reading entered. A thin blue thread ran from the crown on Briala's head to the diagram in the air. The inner teeth of the drawn crown glowed one by one. The Traitor Crown read. Meron precedent entered. Mercy memory targeted. Inner teeth engraved. Archive comparison punished. The last line made several archive clerks flinch. Archive comparison punished. That was not treason. That was reading too well. Briala understood then why the lower archive had always been divided by task. One servant scraped wax. Another cleaned binding. Another copied index marks. No one lowborn was meant to hold 2 layers of a record long enough to compare them. She had compared them anyway. Not because she was blessed. Because she had been ordered to clean the wrong shelf, and had eyes the court did not expect to matter. Aricor's voice came slowly. The crown was taught to punish memory that compared layers. Corveth answered. It was taught to identify treasonous alteration. No, Briala said. It was taught to punish anyone who noticed alteration had already happened. The crown pulsed. Alteration already happened entered. Corveth's roll smoked harder. Aricor turned toward him. If my first mercy formed the crown's teeth, then the thing I allowed to judge her was built from the death that replaced my pardon. The crown wrote his words in blue. Royal recognition entered. Judgment instrument implicated. Archive contact pane continuing. The last line burned nearest Briala's knees. She looked at it and forced herself not to lower her head. Do not look at that line as if seeing it pays for it, she said. Aricor's face tightened. Good. A king could drown in recognition and still leave servants holding the weight. Corveth snapped the correction roll wider. Majesty, the servant is manipulating guilt language. Briala looked at him. No, I am surviving your crown's vocabulary. The crown rang low. Vocabulary entered. The diagram above her shifted. The engraved teeth became visible in detail, each one etched with tiny black marks. Not names. Phrases. Mercy error. Surrender. Deception. Pardon contamination. Archive contact. Every phrase was a mouth made smaller. Every phrase turned one kind of mercy into a kind of treason. Aricor stared at them. Who ordered the engraving? Corveth's answer came smoothly. Engraving followed the first treason precedent. Briala's voice cut through the smoke. That is not a who. The Traitor Crown pulsed. Who requested? Corveth's composure sharpened into something colder. No further reading. He thrust the correction roll toward the blue diagram. Black ink leapt like a net. The crown clamped down. Briala screamed. The sound tore through the hall and struck the painted dead kings above the balcony, where blue glass eyes stared down and remained useless. Aricor moved. Stopped. The warning flared. Forced interference collapses crown formation record. Treason claim restored. Archive contact condemned. His hand lowered by inches, slow enough to hurt to watch. Briala's breath shook. Now she whispered. While it still hurts enough to read. The crown burned blue-white. The Traitor Crown had not been taught by treason. It had been taught by Marin's corrected mercy engraved into its inner teeth, so every archive servant who could compare old ink to new would become a mouth the crown could bite shut. The inner teeth of the Traitor Crown began to glow against Briala's skin. Not all at once. One point after another lit from within each iron claw, waking with a thin blue line that matched the phrases floating above her mercy error. Surrender deception, pardon contamination, archive contact. The words had been carved so small. No court noble had ever needed to see them. They were not meant for eyes. They were meant for the skull. Briala felt each phrase press inward. The crown did not choose her. It did not protect her. It found the part of her that had compared old ink to new ink, pardon script to execution script, mercy to treason, and punished that comparison as if reading itself were a crime. Corveth Fell's correction roll still smoked in his hands. The black ink he had thrown at the vision clung to the edges of the blue fire diagram, trying to close the crown's construction record before it could name the requester. The archive clerks behind him held their ledgers too tightly. One young clerk's fingers shook against the spine of a black index book. Briala saw it. So did Aricor. "What is that index?" the king asked. The young clerk went white. Corveth answered for him. "Routine crown formation inventory." "Bring it forward." No. The word left Corveth before office could dress it. The hall changed. A refusal spoken too quickly was a door opening where a wall had pretended to stand. Briala lifted her head. Blood slid down beside one eye, but she kept it open. "Read the inventory." Corveth's voice sharpened. "Inventory records cannot be tried through crown contact." Briala almost smiled. Then why did the inventory shake when he named it the Traitor Crown rang? Inventory fear entered. The young clerk flinched as if the words had touched him. Aricor held out his hand. "The book." The clerk looked at Corveth. That was the answer before the book moved. Aricor's face darkened. "Not him. Me." The clerk stumbled forward and placed the black index book in the king's hand. The moment Aricor touched it, the Traitor Crown tightened. Pain flared behind Briala's eyes. Her bound hands curled in her lap. The crown did not loosen because the king held evidence now. It kept using her as the contact that made evidence readable. The index opened by itself. Blue fire leapt from the crown to the page. The Traitor Crown read. Crown formation inventory entered. Inner tooth phrases requested. Archive comparison risk identified. Witness lines retained. Briala's breath caught. Witness lines. Corveth moved. Majesty, that term predates current archive structure. Aricor did not look at him. What witness lines? The crown answered before Corveth could. Crown record witness line Fen. The word Fen burned bright enough to light Briala's bound hands. Her name. Not Briala only. Her line. The lower archive had always said the Fen family had steady eyes. That was the polite version. Her mother had compared ink so well she was moved from pardon records to dust ledgers and never promoted again. Her grandmother had been blinded in one eye by crown flame while cleaning execution indexes. Every Fen woman had been praised for careful hands and punished for noticing too much. The crown read. Comparison duty assigned. Standing denied. Contact useful. Memory risk controlled. Aricor stared at the page. Briala looked at him through blood and blue fire. You kept us close enough to read what others missed, then low enough for no one to believe us. Corveth spoke coldly. Archive families are assigned according to skill. Skill, Briala said. Another clean word. The crown pulsed. Skill entered. Aricor's hand tightened around the index. Why retain a witness line if witnesses were dangerous? Corveth did not answer. The crown did. Forbidden correction requires living comparison. Crown cannot expose first hidden truth without archive contact. Briala felt the sentence move through the iron. There it was. Not blessing. Not hidden royalty. Use. The crown had been built to bite memory, but the very trap needed living memory to prove what it had swallowed. Her line had been kept close because the archive needed someone who could compare layers when correction became necessary, then deny that person standing when comparison became dangerous. Aricor's voice lowered. She is a witness. Corveth's correction roll snapped in his hand. She is a condemned servant under active treason claim. Briala met Aricor's eyes. Do not make witness another crown word while I am still kneeling. The line struck him. Good. If he named her witness and left her bleeding under the instrument, the word would become decoration. The court had enough decorated lies. The Traitor Crown accepted the warning. Witness word insufficient. Archive contact pain continuing. Aricor looked at that line as if it were a blade placed in his palm. Corveth lunged toward the index. Aricor pulled it back. For the first time, the Dragon King's hand closed over the evidence before Corveth's office could touch it. The correction roll flared black. The crown bit down. Briala screamed, and the blue fire diagram cracked open again above her. This time, beneath the crown's inner teeth, a hidden line appeared at the base of the design. First truth concealed. Aricor looked up. What first truth? Corveth's face hardened. Majesty, that reading cannot proceed. Briala breathed through the pain and forced the words out. Read the first truth. The Traitor Crown burned blue-white. The crown had kept the Fen line near its records because only a crown record witness could reveal the first truth. It was made to hide the traitor. Crown had not begun with treason at all, but with a royal pardon buried alive. Blue-white fire split the crown diagram open, and the Ashen Hall learned there was something older than the word traitor. Not mercy as a memory, mercy as an object. A folded pardon, still wet with royal seal wax, appeared inside the vision above Briala's head. It lay on a black stone table beneath younger Aricor's hand. The ink had not yet been corrected. The execution decree had not yet buried it. The dead king's seal had not yet turned it into error. For one terrible breath, the court saw the pardon as it had first existed. Clean. Direct. Alive. Then the vision shifted. The pardon was carried by a young archive courier with trembling hands and a plain gray collar. He moved through the lower passage beneath the execution balcony, hurrying toward the judgment chamber, where Marin Voss waited in chains. Briala's chest tightened. The courier was not a noble, not a counselor, not a rebel, a servant. Corveth Fell moved so sharply that the black correction roll cracked in his grip. Stop this reading, he said. Aricor did not look away from the vision. No, Corveth's voice sharpened. Foundational crown records cannot be tried through condemned witness contact. Briala tasted blood and smiled without warmth. You keep calling me condemned because you need the foundation to stay buried. The Traitor Crown rang. Foundation entered. Condemned contact disputed. The iron points bit deeper as the vision widened. The courier reached a locked archway. A younger Corveth stood there, not old enough to be gray. Not yet High Crown Warden, but already dressed in archive black, already holding a roll sealed with the dead king's mark. The courier bowed. The king has pardoned Marin Voss. The young Corveth took the folded pardon. He did not tear it. He did not burn it. He placed it under the black correction roll and pressed the dead king's seal over both. The vision darkened. Briala whispered, "Read what happened to the courier." Corveth snapped. No. The crown answered before the king could. Mercy courier entered. Pardon delivery interrupted. Witness contact retained. Traitor Crown trial initiated. The hall seemed to tilt. Briala understood why the phrase buried alive had felt wrong in the crown's earlier line. It had not meant the pardon alone. It had meant the living witness who carried it. The first person punished by the Traitor Crown had not been Marin Voss. It had been the servant who tried to deliver mercy before execution could become law. Aricor took one step forward. The warning appeared beneath him. Forced crown removal collapses. First truth reading. Courier record lost. Briala Fen condemned. He stopped. His whole body looked made of restraint and rage. Briala met his eyes. Do not rescue me from the part that names him. Aricor's jaw tightened. Then he lowered his hand. The vision continued. The young courier was dragged into the ashen hall. The traitor crown, new then darker, less scarred, was placed on his head. He was no older than 20. His hands shook, but his voice did not. I carried the king's pardon. Young Corveth answered. You carried forged mercy. The crown in the vision flared blue-black. The present crown on Briala's head tightened so hard she cried out. Two pains joined across time, the first courier's skull beneath new iron, and Briala's beneath old iron. The traitor crown read. First wearer, archive courier. Charge, forged mercy delivery. Truth, royal pardon carried. Result, memory trapped. Briala could barely breathe. First wearer. Not traitor. Courier. The instrument on her head had been baptized, not in treason, but in punishing a servant for carrying a king's mercy too faithfully. Aricor's face had gone pale beneath the blue flame. Name him. Corveth's mouth became a thin white line. Names of condemned archive couriers are not preserved in crown-facing record. The traitor crown rang. Name withheld. Briala whispered. Read the name. The blue fire flickered. The crown hesitated. For the first time it seemed not unwilling but damaged. The name had been cut deeper than the rest. Not corrected. Removed. The crown read only a fragment. Courier name partially scraped. Fen line proximity detected. Briala's breath stopped. Fen. Her family name burned in the vision faint beneath layers of old ink. Her fingers curled against the ash cord binding her wrists. Corveth spoke over the flickering record. Coincidental servant line overlap. Briala turned her bleeding face toward him. You kept my line near the crown because the first witness was one of us. The traitor crown pulsed. Likely. The word was small. It hurt more than certainty. Because the archive had damaged the name so thoroughly, even truth had to speak with caution. Aricor wished the Briala, as if the floor between them had opened into generations. Your family carried my pardon. My family carried what your court punished. The answer struck him harder than forgiveness would have. Good. She had no forgiveness to give. Not while the crown still used her pain to read a truth his throne had failed to protect. Corveth opened the black correction roll fully. The dead king's seal flared. The vision of the courier blurred. The folded pardon blackened at the edges. The word forged crawled toward the servant's mouth like a living insect. Briala forced her spine straight. Read why the crown kept the memory. The traitor crown burned brighter. Archive contact required. First truth cannot be destroyed without collapsing crown doctrine. Memory trapped for reuse. Aricor's eyes narrowed. Reuse. The crown answered. Traitor crown function established. Mercy carriers condemnable. Future pardon witnesses transferable. Briala felt cold beneath all the pain. There it was. The crown did not merely silence the first courier. It made his punishment reusable. Any person who carried, preserved, compared, or remembered mercy could be named traitor by the same structure. That was why the Fen line stayed close. That was why Briala had been placed where the archive could accuse her hands. Corveth's voice cut like a blade. Majesty, foundational instruments require sacrifice. Briala looked at Aricor. That is how they say servant death when they want a crown to sound holy. The crown accepted it. Sacrifice entered. Servant death concealed. Aricor's voice dropped. No more. Corveth's eyes sharpened. Then remove the crown and end the reading. Briala shook her head once, and pain burst through her skull. No. Aricor looked at her. She held his gaze through blood and blue fire. Not until it names what your mercy cost before Meron died. The traitor crown rang one final time, and the vision of the first courier froze above them, kneeling crowned, still holding the folded royal pardon. The traitor crown had not begun by exposing treason. It began by crowning the servant who carried Aricor's first mercy, trapping that memory so every future witness to mercy could be punished as a traitor. The frozen image of the crowned courier made the hall look away in pieces. Not all at once. That would have been too honest. One counselor lowered his gaze to the floor. One archive clerk closed his ledger with shaking fingers. One noblewoman touched the iron pendant at her throat, as if old law had suddenly become too heavy to wear. Above them, the first mercy courier knelt in blue fire, young and terrified, still holding the folded pardon he had tried to deliver before Marin Voss could die. Briala remained beneath the present crown with blood sliding down her face. The iron points had begun to pulse with the old vision. Not protectively, not gently. The crown was reading through her because it had no kinder road left, and every pulse of memory asked her body to pay for what the archive had buried. Aricor stared at the courier. "Name him," he said again. Corveth Fell's correction roll smoked in his hands. Foundational servants were often unnamed for security of crown process. Briala laughed, once broken and low. "A man carried mercy to your execution hall and you call his name a security risk." The Traitor Crown rang. Name risk entered. Corveth's mouth tightened. The servant's tone proves contact distortion. Briala lifted her head. "Then read without my tone. Read the missing name." The crown tightened. Pain burst white behind her eyes, and for one moment the hall disappeared. There was only metal blood and the sensation of old ink being scraped from bone. The blue vision above her flickered. The courier's face blurred. The letters beneath him fought their way through layers of black correction script. Fen. Then another mark. Not complete. The crown struggled. Corveth stepped forward. The name was lawfully removed. Aricor turned slowly. Why? To prevent martyr formation. The crown caught the phrase. Martyr formation entered. Briala breathed through the pain. You were not afraid of traitors. You were afraid people would remember mercy had a witness. The traitor crown pulsed. Mercy witness entered. The word witness traveled through the hall and struck the Fen line inside Briala harder than any title could have. Her mother had died copying execution indexes. Her grandmother had lost an eye to crown flame. Briala had spent her life cleaning records that would have burned her for reading them too well. They had not been chosen. They had been kept. Useful. Disposable. Near enough to remember. Low enough to deny. The crown read. Fen line retained. First mercy contact concealed. Witness standing denied. Future crown contact assigned. Aricor's face darkened. Assigned. Corveth answered before the king could turn the word into accusation. Archive families inherit specialized duties. It is not unusual. Briala looked at him. No. It is only old. The crown rang softly. Old entered. Aricor looked from the first courier to Briala. Your family was kept near the crown because one of you carried my pardon. My family was kept near the crown because your court needed people who could remember, and no one would believe. The line landed between them with no mercy in it. Good. Aricor had been given enough returned sorrow. Briala would not make it sweet. He lowered his voice. What was his name? The crown flickered again. The courier's mouth moved in the vision. No sound came out. Corveth's roll flared black. The missing letters bled blue through the ink. Bren Fen. The name appeared above the kneeling courier, thin and damaged but alive. Briala stopped breathing. Bren Fen. Not a legend. Not a lost royal. A servant. A man with her blood name kneeling beneath the first version of the crown, now cutting her head. The Traitor Crown read. Bren Fen. Mercy courier. First crown record witness. Condemned as traitor. The hall held still. Aricor looked as if the name had struck him in the chest. Briala felt nothing clean. No triumph. No relief. Only the terrible confirmation that her family's suffering had not been accident, or bad station, or archive misfortune. It had been maintenance. Corveth snapped. A damaged crown name cannot revise sovereign doctrine. Briala looked up at the blue fire courier. He was not doctrine, no, Aricor said. He was a man. The crown accepted it. Witness humanity entered. Corveth's eyes flashed. Majesty sentiment will collapse crown law. Aricor turned on him. Then crown law has been standing on a servant's missing name. The blue vision widened. Bren Fen held out the pardon in both hands. Young Aricor's seal glowed on the wax. Behind him, Maron Voss waited unseen beyond the execution door. The timeline became cruelly simple. Mercy was written, mercy was carried, mercy was stopped, the courier was crowned, the prisoner was killed, and the king's public image was remade from the ash. Briala whispered, "Read what happened after Bren was crowned." Corveth's correction roll cracked loudly. "No," the crown answered. "First witness crowned. Mercy delivery halted. Maron execution completed. Merciless image stabilized." Aricor closed his eyes. Briala did not let him hide there. "Open them." The command came from a kneeling servant wearing his court's torture instrument, and still the hall obeyed before he did. Aricor opened his eyes. Briala's voice shook. "You can grieve him. You can grieve Maron. You can grieve the part of yourself they buried. But I am still wearing the crown that made all of it useful." The traitor crown pulsed. Present pain continuing. Aricor read it. This time he did not look away. Corveth moved toward Briala with the black roll raised. The reading must end before the crown turns foundational grief into public rebellion. Aricor stepped into his path, not past the warning, not touching the crown. Between Corveth and Briala, the traitor crown rang once, as if noting the position. Royal obstruction entered. Corveth's voice went cold. "Stand aside, Majesty." The hall seemed to forget how air worked. Aricor did not move. "No." The black roll smoked harder. The crown tightened so fiercely Briala cried out, and Aricor flinched as if the pain had crossed the space between them. But he still did not break the crown. He was learning the difference between protecting her and erasing her proof. The crown wrote a final demand beneath Bren Fen's name. For Briala Fen to leave the traitor crown alive, Aricor had to void the first treason precedent name Bren Fen as mercy witness and refuse the merciless image his throne had worn in place of truth. The demand beneath Bren Fen's name made every crown seal in the Ashen Hall burn blue. Not with loyalty, with exposure. Nobles looked down too late at rings, pendants, ledger clasps, and iron buttons engraved with the first treason precedent. The law had been carried on bodies for years, not as memory but as permission. Permission to call mercy weakness. Permission to correct pardons. Permission to keep the Dragon King frightening because fear made cleaner obedience than trust. Briala stayed on her knees beneath the traitor crown. The iron points had gone so deep that pain no longer came in flashes. It had become a room she stood inside. Blood warmed the side of her face. Her bound hands trembled in her lap. The blue fire vision above her held Bren Fen kneeling with the folded pardon Maron Voss, waiting unseen beyond the execution door, and Aricor standing between Corveth and the crown he had allowed to touch her. Corveth lifted the black correction roll. "Majesty, voiding the first treason precedent will destabilize every execution founded on surrender law." Aricor did not turn. "Good." Corveth's face tightened. "It will weaken the throne." "No," Briala said, her voice rough from pain. "It will weaken the lie that wore it." The traitor crown rang. Lie-wearing throne entered. Aricor looked at the words, then at Briala. His expression did not ask her to soften them. That mattered. Corveth spoke faster. "Bren Fen was condemned by lawful crown procedure." "He carried my pardon," Aricor said. "He carried unauthorized mercy. He carried my command. Your command was corrected by dead sovereign authority." Aricor's eyes burned cold blue. "Then I refuse that authority." The black roll snapped open by itself, its correction ink crawling like insects across the air. The dead king's seal flared above Briala, trying to press down over Bren Fen's name. The crown tightened. Briala's body bowed forward before she could stop it. Aricor moved one step, then stopped before the warning could right itself. He had learned the trap fully now. Force would give Corveth erasure. Mercy without procedure would return treason. Rage would make the archive clean again. So he stood still and made power do something harder. "I void the first treason precedent," Aricor said, each word striking the floor like a blade. "I name Bren Fen as mercy courier and crown record witness. I name Maron Voss as pardoned before execution. I refuse the merciless image preserved by the dead king's seal and carried through the crown warden's archive." The ashen hall went white with blue fire. The traitor crown screamed. Not Briala, the crown. Its inner teeth lit one by one, then cracked through every engraved phrase. Mercy error split. Surrender deception broke. Pardon contamination burned backward into ash. Archive contact flickered, then reshaped. Archive contact witness. Not traitor. Not source. Not forgery. Witness. Corveth shoved the black roll toward the crown. Correction authority stands until succession law releases it. Aricor finally turned to him. Succession law ended when I became king. You kept my father's seal alive because a dead command obeyed you better than a living one. The traitor crown accepted the line. Dead command retained. Living king subordinated. Crown warden authority abused. Corveth did not confess. He did not fall apart. He recited law. Majesty, I preserved continuity. I preserved order. I preserved the crown from sentimental fracture. The crown wrote each phrase in blue fire and pinned them beneath the dead king's seal. Continuity used. Order used. Crown image preserved. Mercy witnesses, condemned. Dragon guards moved only when Aricor lifted one hand. They seized Corveth by the arms. He still held the black roll until the traitor crown sent one thin blue flame through its spine. The roll opened, fully spilling old correction names across the floor like dead leaves. Aricor did not look at them yet. He looked at Briala. The crown was still on her head. The cuffs still bound her hands. The record had not finished. The traitor crown read one final condition. Archive contact must be released by named standing. Briala's breath shook. Not pity. Aricor's voice lowered. No. Not reward. No. Standing. The word cost her more than she expected. No Fen had been granted it in the archive. They had been hands, eyes, contact risk. Never standing. Aricor faced the hall. Briala Fen leaves this crown as crown record witness. The Fen line will be entered into royal record as lawful witness line. Every execution tied to the first treason precedent will be reopened. No crown warden may correct mercy into treason without living royal review. The crown opened. Not gently. The iron points withdrew from Briala's scalp with a sound like old nails leaving wood. She swayed, still kneeling suddenly without the weight that had held her upright through pain. Aricor stepped forward, only after the warning lines vanished. He knelt before her, before the court, before the open record of what his throne had worn. Briala, he said, may I help you stand? She looked at his hand, the same hand that had once given mercy, the same hand that had let the crown touch her because the archive made doubt look like treason. Both truths stood between them. She let them. Then she placed her bound hands in his. Help me stand, she said. Do not pretend you lifted the wound. His jaw tightened. I will not. He helped her rise. The court saw her feet steady on the stone before his hand left hers. Blood marked her temple. The crown marks circled her brow like a dark wound no jewel could imitate. No fire erased them. No king made them beautiful. Aricor turned to the blue vision of Briala Fen and bowed his head. Not to a noble. Not to a king. To a servant who had carried mercy and been crowned as traitor for it. Then he looked at Briala. Your family remembered what my throne punished. Yes, she said. And I ruled inside the image that punishment gave me. Yes. He accepted both answers like sentences. Above them, the traitor crown split down the center. From its broken iron rose one final blue fire image. Briala Fen placing Aricor's pardon on the archive table, untouched by correction ink. This time the paper did not burn. This time the word mercy stayed itself. Briala stood beside the Dragon King, not chosen by the crown, not saved into silence, but named before the court that had used her blood as a road to truth. And in the ashen hall where mercy had been corrected into treason for years, the broken traitor crown rang once, not to expose a traitor but to return the first witness to his name.